These are my 100 favorite photos of all time. These photos are arranged from the furthest in the past until the most recent. And though each individual photo tells its own story, together they paint a clearer picture of my adventures around the world over the past decade. Alright, this first photo, and obviously super low quality, goes all the way back to the summer of 2013 in Carmel, California. This was not only my largest lingcod ever, but then was my biggest cabezon, at least on that day. I got absolutely swarmed by a bunch of tourists on the beach, all asking me the exact same questions about the fish. And this day was extra special because my father was also there watching, and it was a great bonding moment for us. This photo I then took from a screenshot about a year later from a GoPro Hero 3 Black on my JBL Woody Magnum 36-inch spear gun. It was honestly too small of a gun, but I managed a lucky shot on this really big California sheephead, and it was just a great fish, a great catch. I love eating this species, I think they're delicious, and diving anywhere in the California kelp is always interesting. This was my first ever white sea bass that I had gotten while spearfishing from a kayak in La Jolla, California. I was super stoked about this. This is a very elusive fish, and honestly a very delicious fish. This was taken just a few minutes after the previous one, but what I really love about this is the excitement and the smiles on the kids, and I often think about how much this probably influences them to go become spearfishermen or watermen in their own future. This was taken in Baja on the Sea of Cortez after I gotten my first 5 Cabrilla grouper, and one of them is in a golden phase. Super delicious species and a lot of fun to hunt. This is probably my favorite photo of all time, taken in the beginning of 2016 in the north of New Zealand. I speared this fish solo on a kayak, and I ended up feeding a ton of people when I came back to shore with it. It was a really great memory, a really great time, and I edited up a pretty good video on it that you can see on my YouTube channel that shows just what a good time it was. This is from a spearfishing trip I did with a few local guys off of Gisborne, New Zealand, and I ended up getting a nice kingfish that day, which was just great for all of us to get a good feed on. This photo shows me looking out over probably the best sunset I've ever seen in my life. This was taken in Stewart Island, New Zealand. That's south of the South Island, really far down there, really wild place, but absolutely gorgeous. Tough trip, but man, I'm glad I went on it. I love this photo. This is of my first stealth camper minivan that I got while I was in New Zealand. I would sleep in this, cook in this, live in this, absolutely love it. Still kind of miss that minivan. As well, while I was in New Zealand, Viking Kayak sponsored me with that brand new kayak while I was there. So I got a lot more spearfishing done while I was there because of that. And this whole area that I'm at was on the Coromandel, and it's just a beautiful place to be. This was a great free dive I had through this tunnel of this sea kelp off the Coromandel Peninsula in New Zealand, and it's just an absolutely magical underwater forest environment. If you've never been into it, it's really worth seeing. This was the end of about a 5-hour solo spearfishing mission off of Bahia or around the Bay of Islands, where I got a yellowtail amberjack, a snapper, a butterfish, a granddaddy hapaca or a scorpionfish, and a really nice pack horse rock lobster. It was just a really great spread of all the different species, and I still look back at it as a great solo spearfishing mission, and I love doing ones like that where I get a really good variety of everything. This is a better photo of the variety catch I got that day that I then went on to share with the entire hostel. It was a delicious feast that we all shared, and several people ended up helping and cooking different parts of different animals in the style of their own country, and that was really special to me. This was one of my last spearfishing dives in New Zealand with a really good friend of mine, Peter Burt. We went out, had a great dive, got a lot of lobsters, a lot of stuff, but then I took a dive and was able to get like a 20+ kilo yellowtail amberjack that I've got on my back. And there's actually more lobsters, I just couldn't hold them. I also got a cover shot for a magazine with this called the New Zealand Bayfisher magazine. Gotta check them out. And yeah, it was a great way to end a really great trip in New Zealand for me. This was, I think, only my 3rd spearfishing mission in Australia, but I got myself a nice yellowtail, a good lobster, and then a lot of people would always comment on the very special and unique lead weights that I have as dive weights on my belt. I was in the water with only my board shorts and a GoPro in my hand, and this baby humpback whale decided it was curious, and it kind of brought its mom along with it because the mom had to keep pushing it up to help it breathe and stuff. And they came insanely close to me. The mom even sort of put its pectoral fin out between me and the baby, I think, and I had to kind of back swim to make sure I didn't get hit by it. But it was by far the closest I've ever been to such an incredible creature. It was an amazing, amazing encounter. This was in Western Australia when I was with a legendary spearfisher named Barry Paxman. I was about 30 or 40 feet down trying to look for some lobsters, and the sun got blotted out by all these fish. It was a really cool experience in nature. Towards the end of 2016, I found myself in South Africa spearfishing with some locals about 100 miles south of the Mozambique border. The guy at the helm name is Kus, and he was an absolute firecracker, and he was bringing us in full tilt for the beach, but I couldn't help but crack a smile. Trying to pose happily with my first ever wahoo speared off of South Africa, I thought everything was going good until I looked at the photos later and realized this guy completely photobombed me, so it's a great memory on two fronts. Around the new year of 2017, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, but I got out for a few spearfishing missions, and when I brought back my fish, I would do these dinners for the hostel. But this was probably the third one that I did, and I wanted to go as big as possible, so I figured, why not do a recreation of Da Vinci's Last Supper painting? And I absolutely love the way this all turned out. It's a fantastic memory for me. I made a lot of friends, so many different countries represented right here, and everybody got to eat some delicious sushi. After 14 months of spearfishing around the world, I got back to the US and began work on my next trip. I bought a pickup truck and a travel trailer and then began the trip from San Diego, California all the way up to Alaska. This was taken partway up there, I believe in Northern California. Just a cool photo that shows the rig. This was in Alaska, where I would get up every morning about 4 a.m. when the sun was up, because that's how early the sun rises up there in the summer, and I would go spearfishing trying to get the world record of king salmon or Pacific halibut. It was a really tough, really grueling trip, but I'm really, really grateful for it. Alaska was an absolutely gorgeous area. I love this shot showing just how beautiful and green this place is. It really is what motivated me to get a sailboat, and it's really motivated me to get back there. And there's a lot of wilderness to explore up there. This is the rare carnivorous sea star that attacks people. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a giant sea star. I'd never seen anything like it, and I had to pose for a photo with it. Super cool though. One of the things I became adept at hunting was giant Pacific octopus. It's actually highly sustainable to spearfish them. They're one of the fastest growing proteins in the world. This one in particular was quite large, and as you can tell by its color, more than a little bit angry, but I made a lot of meals with this and many other octopus while I was up there. Though do be careful if you try to wrestle these things, because they have been known to kill people by holding them under. After catching a king salmon, I gutted it in the water like I normally would, but seeing that this one had roe inside, I didn't want it to go to waste, so I just started eating the roe right there in the water. Alaska was absolutely freezing. My wetsuit was old and had a bunch of holes in it, so anything I could do to give myself more energy, I would do it. And believe it or not, this actually tasted really good. I feel like I've only developed more of a taste for things like this, so again, I'm excited to go back that way. This was an incredibly hard one day. This is the king salmon that I spearfished while I was in Alaska that I then later got the world record on, and I think maybe 3 or 4 years after that, the record was taken by someone else, so it just gives me a good reason to get back up there. I gilled and gutted this fish, so I do wish I had weighed that, but hey, you know what? I'm happy somebody else got it. It only gives me more motivation to get back up there. And you can clearly see by my gigantic smile how happy I am to be swimming around in such cold water with such a thin wetsuit. My entire time up in Alaska, I was actually hosted by some people who let me park my RV on their property, and we became incredibly good friends. I had full access to their house, and most days I would make them a full dinner by the time they got home from whatever I had caught out in the ocean. On this particular day though, I told them to throw a party for all their friends and that I would feed everyone. And I was pretty happy with what I came up with. I think I would start cooking and preparing for days like this at about 6 a.m., but it was well worth it. After that Alaska trip, I moved down to Santa Cruz, California, where I began working and saving money and learning how to sail. I took this photo one morning on my way to my dead-end job, and I think it's just one of those most beautiful, incredible sunrises, but it also meant a lot to me because it kind of reminded me of what I was working for at the time. While living and working up in Santa Cruz, it's also well known for surfing, and I love surfing around the Davenport area, some really big, strong Pacific waves, and I love longboarding them and getting a good rush that way. This is me and the gang after 7 days sailing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Newport, Rhode Island, doing a delivery. The man with the plaid shirt on and his hand on the helm is my sailing mentor, someone I've referenced a lot and somebody who gave me a tremendous amount of knowledge, and honestly is the reason I haven't sunk my sailboat yet and really enjoyed the sailing life. The boat we were delivering was a Santa Cruz 70, a 70-foot monohull, and as we were sailing into Newport, Rhode Island, it turned out it was also the week that the Volvo Ocean race boats were there. This is an around-the-world race, and each one of these boats is multi-million dollars and meant to sail around the world as fast as possible. So they're kind of like the NFL of sailing, and to be able to see them was so cool. This was taken on my trip across the country from Santa Cruz, California to the East Coast after I had sold everything, and I wanted to see a bit more of the US before I eventually went and bought my sailboat. This was taken, I believe, at the Toketee Waterfall in Oregon when I climbed up it and then jumped off. It's just kind of a cool frame seeing my body just before I hit the water. Later on that same trip across the US during the summer of 2018, I was in Washington near Seattle, and there's this large waterfall there I was able to climb down into and get this great shot while I'm trying to practice a little yoga. This is the Stealth Camper minivan that I converted to become my home while I traveled across the country. I really wish I had taken more videos and got more footage of it, but it served me very, very well, and on the open road even saw double rainbows. On my way across the US in my van, I eventually went through the Grand Tetons and sat along the shore and got this shot. Really a magical place, and places like this I love to go back to. It's so different than the ocean, but really brings me to peace. This was how I first found my sailboat. This is Adventureborne back when it was Tethys, and had been sitting in a boatyard here pretty far inland for like 3 or 4 years, I think. Yeah, it was kind of hard to imagine what this was eventually going to become, and I'm very grateful that I had my mentor, Don Radcliffe, to help give me some wisdom and let me know that I wanted this boat. It really was a great boat, and still is. This was my first night staying on the sailboat, so this was September 25th, 2018, the day that I bought it. It was actually an improvement in living space for me because I'd actually been living inside of the van so far. And I just had a very humble bowl of ramen that night, but was very happy that I had made such progress. This was taken at the Hyannis Yacht Club when I sailed over with my mom, dad, and crew member on board. I was very new to many things of sailing and boating at this point, and it was actually sort of one of my first times docking the boat, and it went so smoothly because I talked everyone through everything beforehand. I even got a little Bravo Zulu from somebody that was on the dock, which felt really good. And it's just an amazing memory with my parents, getting to feel like I'd really made it somewhere. I left Cape Cod, Massachusetts with my sailboat in October, so this would have been taken around that time, just as I was leaving New York City after having stayed on a mooring ball right near the Natural History Museum for only $20 a night. I was so stoked for it. I just thought it was such a magical experience, and then absolutely got my butt kicked as I sailed further south. This was taken during April 2019 with Alejandro and Paulina. This was my first time ever sailing to the Bahamas, and because I had to dock so I could check into the country, we then had access to a pool, and again, we just felt like we were worth $1 million that day. Only in the Bahamas for a week, and I already found some great places for spearfishing and lobster harvesting. I ended up grabbing this large one out of a very, very deep barge wreck, but was super stoked to be able to bring him back. Taken about a month later when I had gotten much better with the pole spear. It really took me a while to get the hang of that after only ever using a spear gun. I had myself a very nice hogfish and a very nice mutton snapper. This was an Andros in the Bahamas. My horrible dinghy trying to deflate in the background there, but I was all stoked and all smiled that day. During COVID, I actually managed to get out back to the Bahamas with somebody else on their boat, and while on that, I was filleting everyone's catch that day and noticed a great hammerhead was behind the boat, so naturally I just jumped in the water with them and got some really, really cool footage. This particular screenshot is actually from the camera that's on my head, so I was pretty close when he turned into me like this. It was not a full-grown one, but he was a healthy 9 feet all the same, and so I made sure to give him plenty of distance and respect. During COVID in Florida was really a fun time, not unlike everywhere else from what I heard, but I ended up learning how to kiteboard with some buddies and was able to take my dinghy from the marina where my boat was docked over to islands and other places like that. And this is just a great day having fun in the sun. Also during COVID, I took a trip down to the Florida Keys just to kind of get away from everything and actually get some cruising in because I'd been staying at a marina for quite a while at that point. On this day, I had quite a bit of fun towing our high-field dinghy around with a kite during sunset. In March 2021, after doing a lot of major refits to my sailboat, I set sail back for the Bahamas yet again, had a great crew member with me, Maru, and she took this photo during a sunset. Not even one full day after sailing into and checking into the Bahamas, we had to keep moving, and we ended up almost running into this sunken sailboat on this incredible expanse of very, very flat ground. I ended up meeting the people later that were supposed to tow it out of there, but on their way through, it actually got disconnected. Kind of a funny story, but because of me posting these photos, they actually went back and pulled it out of there, so it was no longer a hazard. But I helped myself to a little bit of wreck diving all the same while I was there. I carry a ton of fun activities aboard Adventureborne. One of those is fire dancing. This is me twirling around and having some fun with my dragon fire staff. Maru was a great photographer and was able to capture this in the dead of night. That little light over my shoulder is actually the moon. Later in my Bahamas sailing season, I was sailing to Hatchet Bay, a really unique place. I put the drone up just as I was coming between the cliffs that they had really blown through to create this entrance. And I absolutely love this shot, although when you're in person, it feels a lot closer. This was taken in front of the very famous Pig Beach in the Bahamas. I had been spearfishing that day, and when I started filleting my fish, I attracted a whole bunch of sharks. Now these ones here are just nurse sharks, but we ended up playing a fun game of keep away and tag. It was really a lot of fun with these nurse sharks, and really the beginning of my relationship, loving and appreciating sharks as much as I do now. I took this shot with my drone after a couple weeks with this incredible group. There's so much I could say about this, so I'll simply say that I loved everybody there. We had an amazing several weeks together. Some of the most fun I've ever had on my boat for so long. With that same group, their professional photographer Laurent took this underwater photo of me in front of what I believe is the largest underwater statue in the world, located just outside of Nassau. At a really cool, very well-known shark diving site off of Nassau, I took this self-photo while taking my mask off at about, I think like 50 or 60 feet down. And I just like how many sharks are around, how clear the water is. And you can even see my other camera on the ground, just getting all the footage I can and taking in the moment as much as possible. While still wrapped up with this incredible group, I caught the largest Caribbean king crab or channel clinging crab that any of us had ever seen. It's a little bit hard to tell, but I actually have a hand spread of 9.5 inches. So this is an absolute monster crab. Not only did we eat this, but I was able to preserve the arms of it and dried them and sort of kept them as like a trophy. A few months later, I found myself further up in the Bahamas in the Berry Islands, where I just got out for another day's mission to help show some other sailors how to spearfish, and I showed them how I harvest multiple species, and that really makes for the best meals, in my opinion. Another day out in a similar location, again showing other sailors how to spearfish and what different species you can get. Some of these fish I would eat raw, others I would fry, bake, or deep fry. It was just really great to be able to get this many different species sustainably. This was an incredible shot. It really took a lot of work, a lot of time to get it. I had Victoria, my newest crew member, on the boat. We had some grapes. I was feeding some of the Caribbean reef sharks. The one that's coming up out of the water, I named him Rex. I got very used to his movements, and I ended up feeding him quite often. I've gone back to the spot since then. He's still been there. So for him to line the shot up for us was great. While motoring northward in the Bahamas, because there was absolutely no wind, the water was completely glass smooth, and with my world's longest telescoping selfie stick for my GoPro, I plunged it into the water and just got this perfectly timed photo as the camera made its own tunnel through the water momentarily. Back in the US towards the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, a very good friend of mine took me up in his stunt plane. Yeah, he owned a stunt plane then. And I gotta say, it was one of the most unique and adventurous experiences I've had in a good long time, because it was really completely unlike anything else I had ever done. I got to do aileron loops and rolls, and it was really cool. While on a trip freediving throughout the Florida Springs, this one I believe was taken at the Ichitucknee Spring, and I decided to pop the mask off for a second, early morning, the sun's coming through, just a wild shot. Mid-2022, I found myself back in the Bahamas, loving it more than ever. I had just speared a big permit, and I made friends with the chief of police, a commander, and another police officer, the whole station really. They were throwing a bit of a party, and I brought a bunch of food for everybody, seafood that I'd spearfished recently, and none of them had ever had sushi or sashimi before, so it was really cool getting to share a bit of sort of my delicacies with them, and then they cooked up some of my fish the Bahamian way, and I got to have it their way. The Berry Islands will always be one of my favorite places in the Bahamas. In this one, I was dinghy surfing as close to the cliff sides as possible. Really got to be careful with that, but I love the adrenaline and love the shot this gets with the Insta360 X3. Myself and another sailor wanted to see just how big of a feast we could put together for ourselves, and we ended up having a serious feast. Every different type of slipper lobster, Caribbean king crab, spiny lobster, steak, poke, sushi, mac and cheese, quesadillas, you name it, it was a great meal. If you don't have a lot of wind, you can actually clip up your halyard from the top of your mast to the back of your harness, and together it will pull you up super easily. It's very dangerous, and I've definitely cracked my ribs doing it and broken a GoPro, but the experience is just exhilarating, and you look at this shot and it's awesome. Trying to leave the Berry Islands through this very narrow cut, it was dead flat calm, but there was a hurricane far offshore that produced a swell. When it hit the cut, going against the current that was trying to leave, it produced these massive waves, and the footage is unreal, but my boat torpedoes through this wave. It was a very scary experience, but really cool too. During the fall of 2002, I found myself riding out multiple tropical storms. In this case, it was just what was left of one of the outer bands, so I put out just my jib and went for a super fast downwind sail, put the Insta360 X3 camera near my head sail, and then turned it on to the globe feature, and this is what you get. This shot was taken from a GoPro up above on a time lapse just as I was about to begin filleting the largest cubera snapper I had ever spearfished. I think this thing was about 55 pounds. And also in this shot you can see that I've got the 4 boat gardens there, my new swim platform, the inflatable stand-up paddleboard. And all of this is really great to me because it shows this type of lifestyle that I've been able to create for myself. It's sort of been the dream for many, many years. And in this photo, it really all came together. Kiteboarding in the Bahamas can be so much fun when the wind is up there, and this is one of those days. I was just off of Spanish Wells and get my little kung fu moves on, but having an absolute blast. This was my first ever African pompano that I'd ever spearfished. I had seen African pompano that first week when I first got to the Bahamas years ago, but I had never gotten one since, and I was so happy to finally have one. That same African pompano, about a half hour later after I got done filleting it, I take a lot of pride in trying to get as much meat off the fish as possible, so that way as little goes to waste as possible. Whatever I don't eat also goes immediately back in the ocean, so the circle of life really does go on from my sailboat. And again as well, you can see the little boat garden I've got there, camera up top. It's just a great setup, and this is what I live on now, and I absolutely love it. Photo from up above my boat while standing on one of my spreaders. It's cool to be able to look down and see the 1,000 watts of solar panel that I got and just how clear the water in the Bahamas really is. It's such a great place to live. Returning to Hatchet Bay in Eleuthera once again, and this one morning I woke up to it being so dead flat, quiet. This is a really special photo for me, and I think I've actually got this as my computer background. It's something I love to look at and remind myself of the good places I like to go to, you know, especially when my boat is being rocked by side swell. An absolutely gorgeous drone shot off of this small island we were anchored next to off the Cape of Eleuthera. And the only thing this photo doesn't show is about 1 million hungry no-see-ums that descended on us that night. One of the worst night sleeps I've ever had in my life. And if it wasn't for those bugs, it would be true paradise. But because of those bugs, no way, I had to get out. Easy sailing, wing on wing. Got my friend out the back, relaxing on a paddleboard. Little sails like this, not trying to go far, not really caring how far we go. I really miss those, and I like to do those as much as possible. Onward and outward. This was taken as I had finally decided that I was not going to go back to the US to reprovision. I was instead going to go throughout the Caribbean. I was feeling pretty motivated, pretty excited in this one. I took this shot as I was leaving Cat Island, heading towards Long Island. It's about 60 feet below on the Tartar Bank. There's nobody else around, my boat has nobody on it, and I couldn't see any boats out there, but I just wanted the thrill of diving in the open ocean with my sailboat. Trying hard to look cool with the shades on the motorcycle. This is the first motorcycle I ever learned how to ride while I was in the Dominican Republic. It was a truly humbling experience. I got laughed at quite a bit, but it took me about an hour or two, and then I was riding it pretty confidently, and I would end up riding around the Dominican Republic quite a bit on different motorcycles, and it's something I plan to go back and do again. It was a ton of fun. Open ocean sailing across the Mona Passage was a little bit of a scary one for me from what everybody had told me, but when I actually got to it, it was super easy. This shot showed just a very clear, very calm ocean. Sailing eastward along the thorny path is absolutely miserable. I really don't want to do that ever again. But this day, as I was sailing along the south coast of Puerto Rico, I caught like 20 knots of wind out of the west, went dead downwind along the whole coast, had a blast. One of my favorite, if not my favorite sail of my life. On that same sail along the south coast of Puerto Rico, I had to keep dodging all of these seaweed islands that were floating around. And I got a little bit silly, as you can tell by the smile, and I decided, you know what, I'm going downwind, I'll get through it no matter what. Let's see if I can slice through it. And it was more like a snowplow is what I ended up doing, but I sure did go through it, and it wasn't, strictly speaking, smart thing to do, but it was a ton of fun and really didn't cause any damage, so I had a blast. In St. Martin, next to Airport Beach with my good friend Jay Safro, taking my brand new Highfield 310 dinghy and the Yamaha Enduro 15 horsepower for a little bit of a whip, had an incoming plane and just decided to turn around and get it in the shot. St. Martin's a great place, I really enjoy it. The ocean side of Marigot Bay in the background there during a storm while I was kiteboarding, had a ton of fun, and then this rainbow came up and my stoke level was just through the roof. Big shout out to my good friend Jay Safro again, who was on the camera that day. St. Martin forms a large lagoon that makes for ultimate anchoring really anywhere, and you can never have too big of waves, which is really nice, or any side swell, so it's a really comfortable place to be. I took this drone shot just after getting the DJI Mini 3 Professional so I could fly a drone a little bit closer to airports. And it was really cool to look down on my sailboat and see this thing that I love. I call it home, I call it my transportation, and it's also where I sit while I'm editing videos like this. This is known as the Witch's Titty in St. Martin. It's pretty close to the border between the French and the Dutch side. It gives this incredible view that I absolutely love to hike up to. And surprisingly, you never see anybody ever go up there, but I've been able to go up there many times and absolutely love it. I took this on a major trip around the entire island of St. Martin with my brand new Highfield 310 dinghy. I wanted to see just how rugged, how tough, how capable this dinghy was. And I found out. I did like 42 nautical miles on just one like 5 or 6 gallon tank of gasoline. And if you want to, you can check out the full video on that on my YouTube channel. A completely magical day out, wakeboarding and subwinging with my friends there in St. Martin. This was just a great time, and I felt very blessed to have a friend group I could hang out with consistently while I was there. I really can't remember exactly where I took this photo, but I just remember how much I was enjoying the free dive that day in the clear water, so I decided I'd snap a shot straight up at the sun. I think I had a unique lens on the GoPro, making it more like a dome, so it made for some really cool and interesting photography. A big reason I spent so much time in St. Martin was because I was waiting for my brand new mainsail from Precision Sails. About a week before that sail arrived, my old mainsail tore on a fun sail with some friends. It really couldn't have happened at a better time, and I only raised it in this case just to get the shot, because you know what, I still like the shot, and I got a lot of use out of that mainsail. One of the last photos I took while I was in St. Martin was with a really good friend of mine. She worked at a horse ranch, and there was one horse that she was teaching to swim out into deeper water. I believe his name was Magic. I spent a lot of time to make sure I got exactly this angle with the lighting and everything, and it's probably my favorite underwater photo I've ever taken. I was working on my engine while in St. Lucia, and I needed to get a little bit of a break, so I took my Highfield 310 dinghy out for a little whip, and I'm really happy I did. It was just good to remember why I do what I do. This drone flight was probably one of the scariest I've ever flown, but also got me some of the best shots I've ever gotten. This photo, along with a lot of other really good video, just showed how beautiful sailing can be. I had like 25 plus knots of wind, but I was heading downwind and around some cliffs, so it was a little bit scary trying to land the drone that day, but I'm happy I flew it. Myself and one of my past crew members, Dea, I'm trying to be as much of a model as possible by her guidance. She is a professional model, I am not, but she was giving me some pointers, and we managed to get this shot while at the Seven Sisters waterfall, probably my favorite place in all of Grenada. Definitely worth checking out if you're there. Part of the reason why I went to Grenada was to haul out for the summertime. This would protect me from hurricanes, but more importantly, I just needed a break from the boat for a little while. This is when they hauled my sailboat out, and it was just kind of cool seeing how much went into it. They did a really good job. One of the first sails I did this past season after being out of the water for, I believe, 4 months. You can see the brand new Precision sail with my logo on it. They did a fantastic job on that. Big shout out to Precision Sails. They make great custom sails, highly recommend them. And I was just feeling life that day. Barely any wind, but I was just slowly moving along. This was from only a month ago. I have my close friend Greta with me on the boat. We were in Dominica, enjoying life there, and you can check out the double rainbow behind us. How great was that? A few weeks back while in Guadeloupe, I discovered this one section that had these huge ocean rollers that would break occasionally, so naturally I took my Highfield 310 dinghy and decided to go surf them, and it did not disappoint. It was a ton of fun. This was the top of Petit Piton in St. Lucia, a really cool and unique rock that goes pretty much 1 kilometer straight up. Hiking this thing is not for the faint of heart, but the view is worth its weight in gold. Just a few weeks ago, myself and 2 friends sailed out of Jolly Harbor all the way over to English Harbor, and I made sure to line up all 3 of our boats for this great little drone shot. It's really cool seeing 3 different boats, the sails, the cockpit, how everything is configured slightly differently, but we're all still on the water having fun. This is exactly where I am at the time of recording this video. This is a very secluded bay on the oceanmost side of Green Island and Antigua. There is really only room for 1 boat in here, and I was fortunate enough to get it. I think I've been here about a week so far, and I'll probably be here another week. I rarely ever see another human, and that's just the way I like it. This is nature and serenity at its finest. And the last photo here to show you guys what sailing is all about. Stringing up the hammock in the cockpit and just relaxing. This again is exactly where I am right now at the time of recording this video. This is the view I see pretty much every day, and I'm really grateful to be here and to be able to look back on all these wonderful memories. Thank you so much for watching my 100 favorite photos and the stories that go with them. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. I hope you feel inspired to begin adventures of your own. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For an exclusive, in-depth look at this adventure lifestyle and to further support my channel, become a member of my Patreon crew. Link in the description. I'll see you on the next adventure.